Hi and welcome to the Spooky Hours. My name's David Saunderson and today we're talking to long-time UFO researcher Nigel Wright. How are you, Nigel?
Hello, good evening to you, David. Keeping well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing well. How are you coping with the lockdown here at the moment during coronavirus?
Well, I'm what they term a vulnerable person. I love that expression. I've got COPD, so I've had to be sort of well isolated for the last 12 or 13 weeks. And apart from a very bad case of cabin fever, where I'm not only naming the wallflowers on the paper on the walls, but probably their children and grandchildren as well, I'm doing okay at the moment, thanks. Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. Now, you've been a paranormal journalist and researcher for 27 years. Now, you've studied lots of things. You were working with the Centre for Fortean Zoology. You're interested in big cats, areas of strangeness, as you've said before in the past. But what we'd like to talk to you today is about UFOs over England, in particular your own part of the world, southwest of England, which you are fully born and bred. Are there UFOs over England at the moment?
Yes, most so now, and on the increase since the start of the coronavirus, as are ghost hunts and ghost sightings. The paranormal and the supernatural seem to be boosted by the lack of diversion, I suppose, of everyday life. People aren't going to work, they've got more time on their hands, they're reading a lot more, they're watching a lot more, and perhaps if you're interested in the night sky, you're looking a lot more and you're watching a lot more, a lot less pollution, a lot less emissions, clearer skies, which people are now petitioning to keep. So, yes, they are on the increase. There's a dramatic increase in UFO sightings over England. Even if you discount the 95%, which you could explain away, the odd 5% is growing. So, yeah.
Well, tell us about the 5%, because that really is unidentified as opposed to identified.
Yeah, I mean,
what are they? What are UFOs?
Well, even the most optimistic ufologist will tell you that out of the 100%, 95 you can explain away as misidentification of balloons, aircraft navigation lights, airships, astronomical phenomena, or natural phenomena as well. But that odd 5% that you can't explain by astronomical terms, you can't explain it because it's military or civil aviation, it defies any rational, logical explanation that you can give to it. That's the 5%. And out of that 5%, 2% is the really interesting stuff where you get alleged communication with the occupants of that craft. The famous, close encounters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on how close you want to go. That's the part where serious ufology takes place. It's great to have the casual observations. They're the bread and butter work. They're the stuff that fuels the research. Because I belong to a group called the National UFO Research Society, run by a guy called Nigel Wright, and he's come up with an idea that I was bantering about for about 20 odd years, about having one organised research and reporting centre for UFOs over the whole of the UK. That way you can freely get all the information about sightings, log it onto a scale map, and see if you've got flight paths. You can coordinate it with RAF and civil aviation to make sure that nothing was in that area at that time, at that precise location. And it gives you an idea as to the habits. I mean, if you start learning about the old army thing, if you learn about your enemy, the more information you've got, the more you're more likely to find a solution to it. So, yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating subject, and Britain is very lucky. We have a long, long history about it. In fact, I'll show you something. This little book is called Flying Saucers Over the West. And it's by a guy called Mr. Byrne, and he wrote it in 1968. And I bought it for 50p in a charity shop about 20 years ago. It's now selling for about £50 if you can find one.
Yeah.
And the first sighting was in 1945 over Exeter. And in 1950, there's loads and loads of sightings of very strange craft from Exeter. And I'm going to sort of publicise those a bit more, because there's those early days that really interest me, when UFOs were treated as some sort of joke. There's an old song that used to go, two little men in flying saucers flew around the world one day, because that sort of summed up, well, it still does sum up some mainstream press attitudes to it. So, I don't care. The more fun they make of it, the more determined I am to find the logical solutions to them.
Well, what sort of drove you into this field? You know, I can imagine, as most of us are, you sort of come into sort of the paranormal as a young kid. Were you one of the youngsters looking for UFOs in the
Yeah,
sky?
yeah. I was sort of born into it, in the sense that I come from country folk. Both sides of my family. My mother's family were Dorset farmers. She was one of 13 children, and were very heavily into their folklore and stories, ghosts and local folklore. My father's family farmed on the edge of Dartmoor, and he'd been there since the 17th century on the same farm. And there were wardens of the moor, and Dad had this wealth of stories of the paranormal and the folklore covering the moors and the Whist Hounds and the Hounds of Hell and the
Yeah.
oh, I love it, and the devil playing cards for your soul. Um, the West Country is a strange, I call it the paranormal peninsula, because we have this odd mixture of culture. Down in the southwest, you've got the native Celtic culture. Then you had an influence coming from Wales and from Ireland of that form of Celtic culture with the Druids. Before that, of course, you had Stone Age. Then you go in, you've got Vikings and Norman. Then you've got the pirates, and of course, the locals weren't beyond telling a few very wild and racy tales about ghosts and phantoms and murdering monsters to keep the revenue men from going too close to where they wanted them not to go when they were wrecking or whatever. So yeah, I mean, the West Country has got pixies, it's got everything you want to know. Big cat legends, loads and loads of that sort of stuff. If you want anywhere to go hunting the paranormal, go to the West Country. We'll give you a feast galore, you know. So yeah, grew up there, lived in a haunted cottage, saw a lot of ghosts, visible ghosts,
Yeah.
apparitions. Attacked by poltergeists when I was a young kid. 8 years old, went on camping holiday with a caravan down to Plymouth, and that was what, 1965. That night, was a terrific thunderstorm. I woke up in the front of the caravan. There was a curtain partition. I had a bed in the front made up. My parents were in the middle, bed in the middle. And I could hear my dad sort of going, it's there, it's there. And they were obviously looking at something in out the window. My mum was going, God, I can see the portholes all down the side. I can see people walking along. And my dad's a professional photographer. So I can hear him rustling to grab the camera he always had loaded. Pardon me. And he was trying to take a photograph, reach for his glasses, never managed it. This thing, Mum said, oh, it's going up at an angle. It's got a pole dangling on the lines, power lines. It's gone. Shut up, gone. Now, the odd thing was, they never talked about that. Next morning, it's as if it never happened. I must have gone back to sleep. Pardon me, sorry. So, shoot forward in time till 1997. And I just joined a paranormal group in Exeter. I was starting out as a freelance journalist, and I was given an opportunity for an assignment. The leader of the group, John, he said, well, look, we've got this lady who's lecturing tonight. She's a professional hypnotherapist, and she regresses people. He said, sounds like you've got missing time there. Would you consider being hypnotized and consider an assignment, doing an article on it? So I said, yeah, you know, like any journalist, it sounds interesting. I'll give it a go. Now, I didn't believe particularly in hypnotic regression. I didn't believe in being hypnotized. I don't think I could be. And two, I've got a grievous doubts that I'd heard about hypnotic regression through a thing called false memory syndrome, FMS, which states that basically the mind is a terrific storyteller. And subconsciously, even if you are not aware of it, it will take every bit of information you may have absorbed into your mind. And remembering from the age of 8 onwards, I was fascinated then by UFOs, and I'd read hundreds of books and every American book I could lay my hands on, because that's mostly where they came from. Few of the English authors, and I just was obsessed with it by then. I'd been to lectures, I'd worked, so I thought, well, all this information is going to be stored up here somewhere. So it's probably FMS. If I do write anything, yeah. It's an interesting story to write up on, but I'll say, in fact, I titled the piece, I was allegedly abducted, because I think the allegation word is very important there.
Yeah.
And I placed very little credence on the information itself. And time out in the information, I've been abducted by what they term to be Nordics, tall blonde people, very handsome, male and female, tight-fitting suits, which I described, a strange badge, which I was told to remember. Which he said, you won't remember everything at once. I was told under hypnosis, these people had said to me, you'll remember bits. Once you remember one bit, it'll come back in bits and pieces. They tell me they weren't for space. They weren't from some far off galaxy. They were from our own time, well, from our own race in a future time. And they'd come back. Now this is where it starts getting, and I'm starting thinking to myself before I knew the facts. Oh yeah, no, here we go. That they were doing research for DNA on bowel cancer. And I thought, that's different. And they'd shown me this floating screen and with a helix, which now I know to be a DNA symbol. And I looked across and saw my mother and father laying out and being examined by these people gently. There was no violence or nastiness. There was no little greys doing horrible things with anal probes or anything like that. It was all being done very calmly and politely. And that was it. That's the story. Pardon my coughing.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
And so anyway, that was the end of that. I wrote up the article, published it, and left it as an open-ended article saying, believe it or not, but this is what I can present to you. And 6 months after I had the article published was my annual checkup, because I'd had bowel cancer. I hadn't told the hypnotherapist that. She was unaware of any of my medical background. I didn't want to pollute the evidence, as it were. And lo and behold, an Australian doctor was introduced to me by my specialist. He said, oh, this is Dr. So-and-so from Sydney. He's doing research on a possible connection between DNA and bowel cancer. Would you have any objections to him taking part? And at that point, my mouth sort of went, hey, this is a bit odd. This is 6 months post-hypnotic session. So there's no question of it being sub-suggestive in my mind already. And then, lo and behold, sadly, 20 years later, my father passed away with a cancer in exactly the same part of his bowel that I had mine. I was lucky I survived. So if you like, there is a DNA link there. Take from it what you will. I've got evidence to prove that there was no contamination of the original evidence.
What do you think it was? What do you think it is? Like, if you had to summarize that in one sentence,
I think I had probably an encounter probably with people from our own future. And the more I think about it, I think it's rather, if I say interdimensional travel, I don't mean it in the sense they've come from a parallel universe. They might very well have. But I think they probably are time traveling from the future, which when you think about it, we're already trying to do that ourselves.
So are you suggesting that UFOs are time travelers, or?
I think they're interdimensional far more than they are alien. I grew up in traditional ufology. I mean, I've been to ufology, 50 odd years? Yeah. And like most, I accepted alien as being ET was the answer to it all. Yeah. They were nuts and bolts ET. But the more I'd thought about it, I got it to 20 years ago, and I thought, this isn't it. This isn't it. This isn't the answer. It's too simplistic. It's too putting it all into one pigeonhole. Yeah. I mean, we can all say advanced military craft. We know that. We can say alien. Yes, perhaps a small percentage. But then you think, why somebody come 40 million light years to visit a Class M planet on a very average star in the corner of the universe? We're not that unique. We've been finding out there's loads of planets that look like ours, similar sort of habitats. Now we're finding more and more, survivable planets in the universe now by the day. So what makes, why would they want to visit Earth in particular? Maybe they seeded us. We've got this sort of thing of with the Anunnaki, with the ancient Sumerians. Yeah. That's another aspect which fascinates me. I find it interesting that the Egyptians painted helicopters in their pyramids and electric light bulbs. And then you think, well, how else did they do the decoration on there without having smudges of smoke fumes everywhere and soot? And it's an interesting thought, But then I come back to, if you were traveling in time and you came back to a past point, what would you do as a scientist? Well, you take samples. You would observe. You wouldn't necessarily interfere. You would probably do the old Star Trek thing, a non-intervention clause. It makes common sense. You wouldn't want to, destroy or disrupt the flow of time. So you probably would stand on one side, observe. You would definitely take samples. Yeah, and if you were interested in anything medical, perhaps in the future there's a medical problems that they want to cure, and the clue is in the DNA of their past ancestors. So there's all sorts of reasons why they would do the sorts of things that the alleged aliens and UFOs do now. Um, Men in Black, this fascinating subject, and everyone thinks it dates in the 40s and the 50s. No, it does not. The first recorded thing of Men in Black I found was in 1909.
Okay.
They have been around for a long time. And as John, my friend from the CF said, my fellow boss, he said, if you were to go back to the Battle of Waterloo, you'd probably find a black carriage being drove by black horses, arrived very suddenly, two black-dressed gentlemen coming out and saying, has anyone seen any weird ships in the sky? And then zooming off. You can bet your bottom dollar if at any major point in science or history in the past, there will have been these mysterious figures in black.
Well, what do you define as a Men in Black, just so people understand what you mean by that?
Yeah, okay. Men in Black, I have never come across one personally, but I have come across a variation called a woman in white. Or rather, my wife has. She was threatened by one, which is a wee bit disruptive when you've got a 3-month-old girl like we had at the time. I'll come to that in a minute. Men in Black, supposedly alien. Again, we come to that alien, and I'll put parentheses around that because let's just say occupants of craft who dress up all in black for some reason, black suits. Like if you think of the film Men in Black, you're thinking the right sort of outfit. They usually arrive in old-fashioned black cars. They knock at the door. You've probably had a UFO experience, or one of your family has, or you've talked to the press about something they don't want you to talk about, and you'll be warned off. And they'll usually do some trick to scare you by making a coin melt through the hand and drop on the floor. Now there's another clue. Interdimensional. It's not magic. It's a trick of science. And there is people were magic and all these sorts of tricks. If you'd gone back 500 years and I had with a disposable lighter and lit up a bonfire in front of people, I would have been hung or drowned as a witch.
Yeah.
But it's only because you don't understand the technology. And it's the same with UFOs. We're scared of it because we don't understand the technology of it. We're getting there.
Tell us what happened with your wife, though. You said that she was approached by a woman in white.
Well, that was the early days of journalism, and I, like most pretty experienced journalists, was looking for the big story, the big break. I wanted to cause a bit of reaction. So I rather stupidly wrote to the MOD and said, look, I've got an idea. This is probably this. This is how I design it. This is how this craft works. These are all the documents I've designed and drawn up and worked out. Sent it to the Department A2A of the Ministry of Defence, taken from Timothy Good's book. And I stupidly wrote and sent this thing off, expecting just a letter back from the government saying, dear nutcase, please take yourself and burn it in the nearest bonfire, But I didn't. I got a very strange letter back saying from a flight lieutenant in the RAF, saying very interested, very, very good presentation, but it doesn't meet our requirements at this moment. But thank you for submitting it. So that's fair enough. It's a brush off. So end of story. And then about 2 weeks later, my wife got a knock on the door. I was just out. I was out the shops. And she went down, brought the kids in her arms, opened the door. There's this woman stood in white. It's a boiling hot day like today. And she had a white headscarf on, white mac, white trousers, and dark glasses, and a white scarf, chiffon scarf. She said, is your husband Nigel Wright, who writes about UFOs to the government? Now, my wife thought that was odd anyway, because nobody knew that about that except her and I. She said, he might be, being very cautious. She said, well, tell him not to write letters like that anymore, otherwise it could be very bad for you and the child. And my wife was a bit shocked and slammed the door in panic, And then after about 10 seconds, thought, God, no, I'm not having that. So she left the child in the playpen for a second, dashed out the door. There's no sign of this woman. And the road's perfectly straight. You can see 500 yards each way. There's no traffic. There's no cars. There's nothing. She disappeared within a matter of seconds. She'd gone.
Yeah.
And that's the woman in white.
So
These threats are often empty, but they're scary at the time.
did anything like that ever happen again to you or your family?
Well, my family and I, all of us, have suffered missing time. Driving back from North Devon again, the daylight today. I went up to see John, who lives in North Devon. It was still daylight. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We had a 40-mile drive back to Exeter, then on to Exmouth, where I used to live on the East Coast. And we'd gone about 10 miles or so, and I said, "Oh, it's 2 o'clock. We're going to be ages getting back home. It'll be tea time." Like you do, normal conversation. Next thing I know, literally within a couple of minutes, I look up and I'm 5 miles outside Exeter. Thinking, and I immediately hit me. I thought, that's weird. I was 35 miles 2 minutes ago. I'm 5 miles, and I recognised the countryside. And I said, "Have I been sleepy driving or something?" And everyone else is saying, "No, and I won't use the terms, but you can imagine there's some expletives going around with a car full of adults. What the heck's going on?" And we all recognised the fact we'd done about 35 miles in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And I'm a fast driver, but I'm not that fast, and that was missing time. You can explain it when it's one driver and he dozes off. God forbid it happens. You go into some sort of semi-trance state. You're too tired driving, but not four people in a car all experience the same thing. So yeah, I've had that. I've had UFO experiences up to here. I've had FTs. I've seen flying triangles. I've had a crop circle making FT. I've experienced a crop circle.
Well, what does FT stand for?
Flying triangle. It's
Okay.
Literally a flying triangle. The term ufologists use for is TR3B. Like that's an old reference name to an old Ministry of Defense American military model of that sort of craft. It was termed a TR3B. Today, obviously, that's 30 years ago. So today it'll be the modern descendant. They're normally triangular, dark, or black. They can vary in size from the size of a small aircraft up to the size of an airliner. They're enormous things. I had one over here about 3 years ago. They're normally silent. They can fly and hover. They can turn on sixpence, and they can shoot off at hypersonic speed plus. They really are amazing performing. Those are the ones that I tend to think are military. Shall I say that calling the new thing a U.S. Space Force probably isn't coincidental. I think they've been around for a lot longer than people know. But that's it's a UFO, but not in the true sense.
So you were talking about before about areas of strangeness. I think what was the term you used? Areas of high strangeness.
Yeah.
You've got some theories about that, but maybe explain what are areas within Britain that you see as being areas of particular strangeness, of high strangeness.
Can I just? Well, I'll tell you what. I'll use two well-known ones, which should be fairly well known to all your viewers, and that's Stonehenge.
Yep.
Rendlesham Forest, the famous Rendlesham Forest, and that's the well-known ones, and a place called Cannock Chase, just outside Birmingham.
We know Cannock Chase. Yep.
And in my part of the world, obviously the moors, Dartmoor, Exmoor, but also a place Holden Hills, which is just out of Exeter, and a little small place called Woodbury Common, which is where I did a lot of my things. It's about 2 miles outside Exeter on the East Devon coast. They tend to be, the topography is usually fairly similar. They tend to be high, common moorland with gravel, usually with a granite amount in it, flowing water on the surface and underground. They usually have Iron Age or Stone Age remains. Forts would be common as a fort. Stonehenge, obviously, the stone ring. Whether you believe in ley lines, I don't know, but they said to have ley lines cross over them. I know they have strange forces because it affects radios. Radios of all types, including military ones, tend to go a bit ballistic. That happened to me as a taxi driver back many years ago. My two-way radio, which is perfect and Home Office approved, always went ballistic there and never got reception when you're 2 miles from home. You could be the other side of London and pick up home. They were very strong radios. J. Hennick, the Dr. Hennick, the late very famous ufologist and researcher, termed the thing area of high strangeness. They occur all over the world. They can occur on land or on water. On water, we call them places like Bermuda Triangle, or the Devil's Triangle off the Sea of Japan. They're just places where you have a larger concentration of supernatural or paranormal events, legends, witchcraft, hangings, suicides. For instance, I would be calling, there's one particular corner of a car park, funny enough, beside a burial mound. There's 40-odd burial mounds there, Neolithic burial mounds, all of which, by the way, are empty. Very strange. They were never used. Beautifully used, and have spiral decorations in the burial floor, unlike anything else in England. And people always committing suicide there. There's about at least a dozen poor souls have committed suicide, always in the same way. They burn themselves in the car. It's very odd. UFOs, black cats are right there. I've seen a black cat there myself, up close and very personal. That was a Melanistic leopard, about 4 foot long. Not very nice guy to see at 11:30 at night when you're in a car. Like I was in the car, but I sat there and absolutely locked the doors and just shook. And I'm a researcher. You'd think I loved it, wouldn't you? I wouldn't. I was paralytic. Fear. I hadn't been drinking. I was paralytic with fear. It's got this local legendary sort of reputation for being the sort of place you wouldn't want to be to late on a night. They've always rich in history. Cannock Chase, as you know, it's got a German war cemetery there, which is really weird. It's got German war dead from World War I and II. It's got a reputation for big feet, black-eyed children, ghosts, time-traveling cavemen type creatures seen there. It's just the sort of thing that you get. They're always that similar sort of topography. And I've got this theory that it's the topography, the geology of the place that makes it special.
Okay.
They're not so much that they're mystic, it's the fact that geology combines to make the place vulnerable to rifts, if you like, or distortions in the dimensions. And it's purely science. It's a distortion of the electromagnetic fields. And I hate the word portals because it's so widely used. And I don't like climbing on bandwagons, and if you use a word like portal, you're proclaiming that that's what it exactly is. So I've got to use it because there's no other word to describe it in the English language. It's an entryway. It's an entryway into the other dimensions. And it can occur and it can disappear. It can either be regular or it can just be haphazard. It can be two-way. It can be I think two-way because I think that's where, in Britain, especially where the Bigfoot things come from, is that the creature is a normal creature from another dimension that comes in and haphazardly then disappears back again. It's a theory I've got, and it's built up over a long time. I'm abbreviating it a lot, but
no, I imagine you are. So this is what feeds into your idea that UFOs are from other not dimensions, but what you mean is they're not necessarily alien to us. They're just maybe time traveling.
Well, it depends what you mean by the word alien, don't you? I mean,
that's
I suppose
right,
you could say alien is such a wide term. I mean, we call someone from France an alien.
Extraterrestrial.
American especially will call everyone an alien. If you don't ring, you're an alien. But yeah, I mean, the word itself.
Extraterrestrial. Then let's put it that way. Then
let's just break it to ET. Nice popular way of doing it. The ET hypothesis is good. It's certainly entertaining. It's an idea. It's a good theory. There is a lot of circumstantial evidence to suggest that people have encountered people from they state they're from other civilizations in the universe. Whether they are or not, who knows? I couldn't tell you if the alien who says he comes from another universe does, or whether he's telling a story. Who can say? Yeah. I don't know if the Nordics I met did come from the future, or whether they come from another planet, and they tell me that just to confuse me all the more.
That's an interesting point, isn't it? Yeah.
That's what makes ufology such a brilliant subject, and that's what makes the paranormal great. Is that nobody's got an answer. I'm sorry, I don't like the word. I know you used it in the introduction. I'm very grateful for it, but I don't like the word expert. Because if you're dealing with the unexplained, how can you be an expert in the unexplained?
Well, let's say enthusiast then. Would you like to be? You're an enthusiast then. We'll call you an enthusiast. We'll call you a long-time enthusiast of the paranormal.
That's okay. I can ride with that. Yeah, that's all right. There's a lot of people with other names for it. When I was in the 70s and a student, I used to be known as a nutcase for the park who sat in the corner of the coffee bar talking to a couple of other fellow nutters about little green men. You know, we used to get, the ribbing you used to have to
Oh,
take. Not nowadays. Nowadays, we've got an ology, as they used to say in the BT ad, but we've become an expert now, you know.
sure.
We call ourselves ufologists and people start taking you seriously then. Yeah, but the more serious evidence we can gather, and the more serious we talk about a subject without saying, hey, I'm reincarnated Napoleon. You can have 500 million reincarnated Napoleons. You know, so if you've got a nut and bolt solid evidence, the movies that cannot be proven to be, you know, photoshopped, the stills. I do photography now. I mean, I grew up in a photographic shop, so and I use Adobe a lot. But there's a way of using Adobe where you use it like everything else. You use it in moderation. You do not whack on every filter going to the full extent. You're going to get pixelation. You're going to get distortion, and you're going to leave yourself wide open for justifiable criticism. So if you say, yeah, I use Adobe, I use it to 1/3 strength, everything. Then I'll retake it and then do the same on the next copy of the print and do the same on the next copy of the print and build it up in stages. Then I can put my hand on heart and say, I haven't distorted the picture. I haven't pixelated the picture. What you see is what you get. It's the best possible enhancement of the object itself. And that way I've got about 300 now pretty good images taken on this highly expensive piece of 15-year-old Samsung S5. Now that's got Adobe Photoshop Express, a free app built onto it. It's inside. So I take the camera, take the shot, and enhance it on the same camera, and I can produce reasonably good images. Because the sensor is small, you cannot blow them up to screen size. That's the only thing. They're pixelate with size. On a mobile screen, they're great. You can get up beyond sort of a 6-inch, 8-inch screen. 10-inch tablet is a maximum for that sort of thing. The new cameras are brilliant. The new S20. I mean, now that one is to do 4 times magnification. The new S20 do 120. It's like you know. Well, this one is 16 megapixel. The new one is something like 50. I think it's 50 megapixels. In more, 4 cameras instead of 1. So I mean, it's chalk and cheese, you know.
Okay. Well,
it's
Nigel,
like comparing a box brownie to the layers. Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. We've got so much to talk about. We've run out of time. Love to get you back. Maybe talking about some of the photographs you've taken, and maybe talk about some of the individual sightings around the place. Because I mean, you've thrown so many ideas at us that I have to go away now and think about some of them so I can come back and.
I do apologise. I've been a cabbie for 20 years, and I talk too much, and I've always loved conversing with people.
No, we love.
I can get carried away with my subject. I do apologise to any listeners.
No, that's why we've asked you. That's why we asked you here to talk.
It'd be a pleasure to come back anytime you want, anytime. Maybe we can talk about pixies and Devon traditions as well. That'd be fun.
That would be lovely as well. I'd really enjoy that as well. So thank you, Nigel. You take care of yourself. It's a warm day out there. So
thank you for asking me on. I much appreciate it. I've enjoyed it a great deal. Thank you.
You take care.
Okay. And yourself. Stay safe. Bye-bye.